Zoe Williams, I own a consultancy called Luminary Mindset Consulting. We work mostly with senior leaders and executives of large global corporations, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to help mostly industries where they're focused very much on subject matter expertise and technical expertise. So for example, that might be the mining industry, engineering, professional services, tech, where there's a heavy focus on IQ. We're trying to help them balance that culture of IQ with an elevated emotional intelligence culture. So we're trying to bring some balance to their culture through emotional intelligence coaching and training. My background, so I've actually got 20 years corporate experience myself. So I was an internal audit and risk director for quite a while. And then I became a leadership coach and an emotional intelligence practitioner, because I've actually got more of an interest in psychology and people and behavior than I ever really had in processes and systems. But I can see how within the corporate world, the two need to work side by side in order for organizations to perform really well. So that's my background. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is either practicing focusing on less things, one thing, or nothing, depending on how much you practice mindfulness. So when we first start practicing mindfulness, we tend to just want to focus our minds on less things. Lots of us are trying to carry lots of thoughts all at the same time in our mind, and we rarely are focused on one thing. We'll be thinking about multiple things all at the same time, and we have quite scatterbrains. That can lead us to feeling overwhelmed. It can lead to exhaustion, tiredness. Some people thrive in that mental state, but if it gets too much, if there's too much going on in there, it can result in exhaustion. So mindfulness is really about us trying to strip back the number of things that we're focusing on in our mind, reduce the number of things that we're focusing on in our mind, to the point where eventually, with enough practice, you can actually focus on nothing and just rest your mind completely. Many people do that through meditation, but there's many other ways that you can practice mindfulness as well. It's rare that we allow our nervous system to calm down and actually rest. And what our nervous system, if it's not calm and in a rest state, it's reading, it's sensing the information that we're receiving through our eyes, through our ears, through our touch, through our senses. Why does our nervous system need to rest? Well, it needs to rest so that it can focus on healing our body. So our body is constantly in a state of restore and repair. There's constantly bacteria coming in. We're constantly fighting viruses. Apparently, if you listen to some research, we've always got cancerous cells in our body that our body is assimilating, digesting, fighting. So the body is constantly in a state of restore and repair. If your nervous system is focused on what's going on outside of the body, the environment, and not focused on sending the right hormones to heal and repair the inside of the body, you're going to suffer from more disease, more illness. Your immune system is going to be depleted, and you're actually going to age faster, according to some research. So you'll notice people who practice more mindfulness appear younger, appear more vital, appear like they have more energy. I know I've knocked at least 10 years off my age since practicing mindfulness, because if you look at photos of me in my 20s, I look older then than I do now, and I'm now in my 40s. So it's a really fantastic way to help your body actually stay young, stay vital, stay energized, and focus internally on what it needs to do, not worrying about what's going on outside of it. Meditation is a kind of mindfulness practice. So how to practice mindfulness? One of the ways that you can practice mindfulness is through meditation. Now, what meditation does is ideally you sit very still, you'll slow down or shut down the kind of physical sensory responses that you're feeling in your body, so through lack of movement, and you'll want to sit in a quiet room where you can't hear anything. Maybe put a mask on your eyes so you can't see anything, sit still so that you're not touching or feeling anything. So you're really kind of reducing the amount of sensory input that's coming into your body, because what that does is that stimulates the mind. So we're really trying to shut down as much of that as possible through meditation. And then you just focus on the breath. Now, why do we focus on the breath? The breath is the way that our body regulates our nervous system. And it's our nervous system that causes our mind to race. So if our nervous system is activated and it feels like it's receiving information that could mean stress or danger, or that it has to think about something, it'll send signals to the brain. So we want to really tap into that, our nervous system, slow our nervous system down, slow the amount of signals that are going up and down our spinal cord to our brain, to allow our brain to just relax. It's a way of kind of getting your mind into a restful state by not actually going to sleep, but it's actually better than sleep, because you're not asleep, you're conscious, you're awake, you're still alert, your nervous system is still active, but it's a very rested, restful state within your mind. Now, meditation is one way to practice mindfulness. Lots of people practice mindfulness techniques that aren't meditation. So sewing, knitting, baking, reading, playing a musical instrument, gardening, anything that just requires you to focus in on something in quite a detailed way. So meditation is focusing in on the breath, knitting is focusing in on the stitch, or stitching is focusing in on the stitch. So you're just focusing on one thing and one thing only, rather than having all of these thoughts and all the sensory input coming into the body. So meditation is one way of doing it. I would suggest choosing to do something that you already enjoy. It's really hard to create new habits and break old habits. Some people find it harder to break old habits. Some people find it harder to create new habits. Some people find it hard to do both, which is really a really tricky situation to be in. So if you already enjoy doing something and you know that it's something that slows your brain down and stops your thoughts from racing, just treat that as your mindfulness activity to start with. And then you can maybe move on to practicing mindfulness in other ways, which will really bring a lot of peace and joy to your life. Once you've mastered mindfulness, you can share it with others as well. So, for example, lots of parents might share a love of gardening with their children, and people can practice mindfulness together, where you're actually in silence, focusing on this one thing together, practicing a mindfulness technique as a society or community, which is a really, really gorgeous thing to do. I lived in Tibet in my early 20s and hung around with a load of Buddhist monks, and in monasteries, that's what they do. They are a community and they collectively run the community together, and they're pretty much in silence practicing meditation and mindfulness all day long, but as a community together, as a collection. It's really, really nice. Well, it depends what you like. But so, for example, if you like the outdoors, I would definitely go for gardening or walking, maybe initially with a podcast or something in, or music. So again, just something that's going to be louder than the thoughts, because again, if you're out walking, you'll still have the thoughts there. So it's initially about learning to focus on something else. So outdoors would be gardening or walking. If you're an indoors kind of person, jigsaw puzzles, sewing, knitting, cooking, things like Sudoku and puzzle books, crosswords. Now, back in the day, if we think about our grandparents or even our parents, depending on what generation we are, a lot of them do things like that, where they'll sit down and they'll read a newspaper and then they'll do the crossword. Why are they doing the crossword? It literally just focuses them on this one thing, where they're not having to have their minds racing. If you've got young children, some people say to me, it's really hard to do this when I've got young children. A bath. Get a lock on the bathroom door, put a sign on the door saying mum time or dad time or whatever, and just go in there, take the newspaper, take your Sudoku book or whatever, but get in the bath and just have boundaries around your time as well. Because I think a lot of us feel selfish or guilty for giving ourselves these moments, especially if we have families or if we've got a job or, you know, other commitments. So it's really important to put boundaries around the time, to say this is the time for me to actually give myself some peace so that I can restore my energy, have my vitality, give a better version of myself to those around me as a result of doing this for myself. So people think their thoughts are them. So the thoughts I'm having in my head, I understand, are not me. They are part of my biological programming. It's part of my survival toolkit. The thoughts come from a bank of words and a database that has been stuffed full of information from the day I was born. All of that information in that database is being used to generate the thoughts. The thoughts are not me. So I can hear the thoughts and I can go, oh, isn't that an interesting thought that I'm having? Rather than it's me that's thinking. I'm not thinking. My brain, my mind is creating thoughts that I can hear as words or see as pictures in my mind. And I don't have to be associated with them. I don't have to listen to them. I don't have to pay any attention to them. I don't have to believe them. They can just be there in the background, like as if I've got the radio on, and I can just witness it and listen to it and experience it and go, oh, that's interesting. or not. It's like, I don't know, for all the parents out there that are listening to this, it's a bit like when you're at a kid's birthday party and there's like 23-year-old kids and they're all doing their thing and some of them are laughing and some of them are screaming, and there's all this kind of noise that you potentially don't want to hear so much. And we have like what we call the parent filters, where you can just kind of turn the volume down, and it just kind of it just mutes it or numbs it or dumbs it down a bit, and you can tolerate it. It's the same thing, just turning the volume down on the thoughts, not having them so loud and so present. We are addicted to this as humans. We're addicted to thinking, which is exhausting for us all, which is why we drink alcohol, which is why we watch TV, which is why we do all the things that we're trying to do to distract ourselves from the volume of thought in our brains. So it's just about turning the volume down a little bit. Lots of breathing exercises. The one that I always recommend people start with is what's called box breathing. The reason it's called box breathing is because it's like 4, 4, 4, 4. So it's the kind of the shape of a box. You breathe. So when we're doing breathing exercises, it's always a really good idea to start by lying on your back with your back flat against a hard floor. Particularly, it's very good because the first thing you want to do when you're learning to breathe for mindfulness is to stop breathing from the chest and to breathe from the belly. Now, we've got a thing called a diaphragm, which just sits at the bottom of our rib cage, which is kind of like a membrane that separates our lung cavity from our intestine, like our stomach cavity, where our intestines and stomach and all that are. But it also acts as a kind of a muscle to help us breathe. So it pulls itself down and pulls and expands the lungs, and then pushes itself up and compresses the lungs to push the air out. So it's what helps us actually breathe. Now, if you're doing diaphragmatic breathing, you're breathing from your lung cavity, your chest, which is quite shallow breathing. So you only fill about 30 to 40% of your lungs doing diaphragmatic breathing. If you do belly breathing, which is where you actually use your stomach muscles and your stomach cavity to draw the diaphragm down, the diaphragm gets pulled down even further, and then you fill your lungs up with more air and you take much more air into your lungs. Now, why is that important? The more oxygen that we can get to our nervous system, the safer or calmer it feels, because when we're in a fight or flight mode, like when there's something dangerous happening around us, we haven't got time to go, there's a saber-toothed tiger. Like, we just don't do it, right? We go, we go into panic mode. So it's really shallow breathing. So when we do shallow breathing, we're sending a signal to our nervous system to say, fire, fire, send cortisol, send adrenaline, it's an emergency, I need very, very rapid response. When we're relaxed and we breathe through our belly, we're sending a signal to the nervous system to say, do you know what, there's nothing dangerous in the environment around me, everything's cool, you can relax, you can focus on healing my organs, my tissues, cleaning my blood, sending all the love to my kidneys, to my heart. Go for it. Just focus on my internal functioning. Don't worry about anything outside of me. So belly breathing tells the nervous system to go into that healing, restorative repair mode. So on your back, you can put your hands on your belly and just try and have your hands raise up and down as you're breathing in. Breathing in through the nose helps, and then out through the mouth. But the back on a hard surface means you can press your back into the ground, and it really helps you elevate your belly while you're breathing. And just do that count of 4 in. So this is the box breathing. So 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Through the nose, hold for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold the exhale for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you only do that 10 times, it has a dramatic effect on your nervous system and the amount of stress hormone that you've got rushing through around your body, and it's very, very restorative. It feels really good. You might get a little bit lightheaded as well when you first do it, which is another good reason to be lying down. So the first thing that I would say for organizations to consider is, how do you know when mindfulness is appropriate in your day-to-day activities? It's probably not when you want people to be fast, quick, problem solving, and you want them to be in their thinking. There are going to be times when you really want people to be being very agile in their thinking, and that's not a time for mindfulness. When is a time for mindfulness is when you want people to be considered. You want their impulse control to be reduced. You want their reality testing. You want them to be able to be objective. You want them to collaborate and listen and hold space for each other. You want them to be able to communicate effectively. You want them to be able to create something new or innovate. That's when mindfulness is needed, because you want people to be in a state of relaxation. You want them to be able to feel safe to express thoughts and ideas that might not be the right ideas, but there's no fear of failure or ridicule, or, you know, that kind of environment is when you want to introduce mindfulness. Now, how to do this, there's so many different ways, but one of the most effective ways is just at the beginning of a meeting to set the tone. So I call it setting the tone, or setting the intention for the meeting. So whoever's leading or chairing the meeting to say, right, this meeting is for us to collaborate. I want to create a space of openness. I want to create a space of collaboration. So let's just take a moment to set ourselves like that. So lots of organizations that I work with actually just take 10 deep breaths together. This causes teams to form really nicely as well. This creates trust, it creates psychological safety, it creates connection. 10 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, set, go. It makes a dramatic difference. At the moment as well, I know most places are getting back into the office in the UK and in America. Obviously in Australia we're not, which is very frustrating. But if you're flying from one meeting to another online, or if you're actually physically moving from one meeting to another, we don't get that time to reset our nervous system. We don't give our bodies a chance to just kind of... So even just going into a bathroom or going into a quiet corridor and doing 10 or 20 deep breaths is a really good way to reset from one meeting to another as well.